We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary, he smirked during my termination meeting. Nothing personal, just cost cutting. My name is Victor Hale, 55 years old, lead systems engineer at Veltria Housing for 18 years. I'd built their entire infrastructure from scratch, architected every expansion, kept everything running so smoothly that the executives forgot how much the company depended on me until they decided they couldn't afford me anymore. I sat across from Graham Vickers, the new chief technology officer who'd been with the company for all of 6 months. He was 42, wore designer glasses, and had an MBA from Cornell. He'd been brought in to modernize operations, which apparently meant cutting the most experienced staff first. The severance package is generous, said Diane from Human Resources, sliding a folder across the table. 2 months' salary plus your accrued vacation time. I nodded, took the folder, and said, "Thank you. Is that all you have to say?" Graham looked almost disappointed. Maybe he'd expected me to argue or threaten legal action, give him something to tell the board about how difficult I was being. "What would you like me to say? Most people in your position have questions, concerns." I shrugged. "Seems pretty straightforward to me." Graham exchanged glances with Diane, who looked equally perplexed by my calm. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't calm. I was just done. There's a difference. "Well, we'd appreciate your help with the transition," Graham continued. "The new engineering team will need some guidance on the system architecture, perhaps a consulting arrangement for a few weeks." "I'll think about it," I said, knowing I wouldn't. We shook hands. I cleared out my desk without complaint. 18 years of work fit into a single cardboard box. I nodded goodbye to a few colleagues who looked away awkwardly, afraid the same fate awaited them. As I walked to my truck in the parking garage, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan, the database administrator I'd hired 12 years ago. "This is Vic. The whole team's freaking out." I didn't respond. At home, I sat on my deck overlooking Lake Ontario, nursing a glass of bourbon, watching the sunset paint the water copper. My wife Elaine placed a hand on my shoulder. "What will you do now?" I shrugged. "Something will turn up." What Graham didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to learn, was that I hadn't just built their systems. I had custom-coded large sections myself with minimal documentation because the company had always refused to fund a proper documentation team. Only I understood the deep redundancies, the hidden security layers, the intricate network architecture, and I wasn't planning to explain it to anyone. Now I started at Veltria Housing back when it was called Bayview Properties, a small real estate management firm with 4 apartment complexes and a dozen employees. Their entire IT infrastructure consisted of 2 desktop computers, a fax machine, and a dial-up internet connection. The owner, Harold Bay, hired me away from a consulting gig in Syracuse. "We're expanding," he told me. "Need someone who can build us something solid." Over 18 years, I'd turned that rudimentary setup into an integrated property management system that handled everything from tenant applications and background checks to automated maintenance requests and rent collection across 63 properties in 4 states. I'd built it piece by piece, adapting, upgrading, refining as the company grew. When Harold retired 5 years ago, his son Justin sold the company to a private equity firm that rebranded it as Veltria Housing. They kept me on, impressed by what I'd built. But things began to change. New executives, new priorities, quarterly targets became more important than long-term stability. My warning signs came gradually. First, they rejected my proposal for a documentation team. "Too expensive," they said. "We'll get to it next quarter." That quarter never came. Then they started bringing in consultants, young MBA types who talked about disrupting property management and leveraging cloud solutions. They'd sit through my explanations of our system architecture with glazed eyes, then recommend off-the-shelf solutions that wouldn't integrate with our custom infrastructure. I kept pushing back, explaining why their approach wouldn't work, showing them the custom code that made our system unique. Eventually, they stopped inviting me to planning meetings. Elaine noticed it before I did. "They're pushing you out," she said one night over dinner. "You need to prepare." I brushed her off. "They need me. No one else understands how the whole system works together." "That might be exactly the problem," she replied. 6 months ago, they hired Graham as the new CTO. He came from a banking software company and immediately started talking about standardization and legacy system replacement. He hired 3 junior engineers fresh out of college, had them shadowing me, asking questions about the system. I answered their questions, but I knew they weren't grasping the complexities. How could they? It had taken me years to build those systems, to understand the interdependencies, to create the redundancies that kept everything running smoothly when problems arose. Last week, Graham stopped by my office. "Quick meeting tomorrow morning," he said casually. "Just a quarterly check." Incognito. I should have seen it coming. The first call came 2 weeks after my termination. I was in my home office updating my resume when my phone rang. Graham Vickers. I let it go to voicemail. "Victor, it's Graham. We're having some issues with the tenant portal. The junior team is working on it, but they're having trouble understanding some of your code architecture. Could you give us a call back? It would just be a quick consultation." I deleted the message and went back to my resume. 3 more calls came that day, each voicemail sounding increasingly desperate. By evening, Alan texted me. "System's been down all day. Maintenance requests aren't processing. Graham's losing his mind." The next morning, Diane from HR called. "Victor, I hope you're doing well. I'm calling because we'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement, just temporary, to help with some current system issues. The compensation would be quite generous." I picked up my phone. "How generous?" $300 per hour, minimum 4-hour engagement." "I'll think about it and get back to you," I said, then hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the lake. Elaine placed a cup of coffee in front of me. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking they're finding out exactly what I'm worth." 2 days later, I got another call, this time from Justin Bay himself, the former owner who'd sold the company to private equity but still sat on the board. "Victor, this is Justin. Look, I know things didn't end well, but Veltria is in serious trouble right now. The system outages are costing us hundreds of thousands. Rent collections are delayed, maintenance crews are paralyzed, and tenants are threatening legal action. We need you back, at least temporarily." I swirled my bourbon, considering my response. "Justin, when I left, I was worth 1 senior engineer's salary. Graham said he could get 3 juniors for the same cost. And now you're saying my absence is costing hundreds of thousands. Sounds like my market value has gone up." He sighed. "Name your price." That's when it hit me. For 18 years, I'd given everything to a company that treated me as disposable. Maybe it was time I treated my skills the same way they treated me, like an asset to be maximized. $500 an hour, I said, with a 20-hour minimum retainer paid up front, and I work remote, no meetings, no office visits. Justin hesitated for a long time before finally saying, "Send us the paperwork." Elaine raised an eyebrow when I told her. $500 an hour? That's insane. I smiled. Not insane enough. Let's see how desperate they really are. Within 24 hours, Veltria wired me $10,000. That night, I logged into the system from my home office. The tenant portal was in shambles. The junior engineers had tried to modernize my code by pasting in snippets from Stack Overflow. They'd broken half the API calls and disabled key redundancies. I spent 4 hours repairing the damage, then emailed Graham a concise report of what I'd fixed. His reply came within minutes. "Thank you, Victor. When can we schedule another session?" Over the next month, Veltria retained me for 60 hours at $500 an hour. 30 grand for what was essentially cleanup duty. Each time I logged in, fixed their mess, and logged out. No meetings, no office politics, just pure engineering. It felt liberating. But I knew this was only the beginning, because the truth was, Veltria's entire infrastructure was fragile without me, and I wasn't about to keep bailing them out forever. Instead, I started something new. With Elaine's encouragement, I launched Hale Systems Consulting, a one-man firm specializing in legacy system stabilization and custom architecture solutions. I reached out to former colleagues, contacts from conferences, even a few competitors. Word spread fast. Within 6 weeks, I had 3 paying clients, each facing the same problem: executives who'd cut costs by firing, Experienced engineers only to discover their systems collapsing under inexperienced replacements. Meanwhile, Veltria kept calling. The outages grew worse. Tenant complaints went public. A local news station ran a story about tenants unable to submit urgent maintenance requests, featuring a family with a leaking ceiling and a child's asthma worsening because mold remediation was delayed. Veltria's reputation tanked, their stock price dipped, and all the while, Graham kept emailing me for emergency sessions. I doubled my rate to $1,000 an hour. They paid without hesitation. Then one night, I got a call from Alan, the DBA. "Vic, listen, they're panicking. The new team can't keep up. Graham's under fire. The board's talking about bringing you back full time." But Graham's resisting. He doesn't want to admit he screwed up. I chuckled. Let him resist. Every hour they delay is another invoice for me. But Alan's voice turned serious. It's not just about the money anymore. The whole system is degrading. If something catastrophic happens, tenants could lose access to financial records, payment histories. Lawsuits could sink the company. I hung up and sat in silence, staring out at the dark water of the lake. Elaine came in. "What's wrong?" I told her. She thought for a long moment. "You could save them. But should you? They discarded you without hesitation." I nodded. Maybe saving them isn't the point anymore. Maybe it's about showing them the cost of forgetting the people who built the foundation they're standing on. The next morning, Veltria's CEO herself called me. Not Graham, not HR, the top boss. "Mr. Hale, we'd like to offer you a position as Chief Systems Architect. Full authority, double your previous salary, stock options, and full control over rebuilding our infrastructure. We've realized we can't afford to keep patching holes. We need you to lead us forward." Hard. I took a deep breath. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of 18 years lifting. "I'll consider it," I said. And in that pause, as the CEO waited on the other end, I realized something important. I didn't need Veltria anymore. Veltria needed me. I didn't give them my answer right away. Instead, I spent the next 2 weeks focused on Hale Systems Consulting. My new clients appreciated me, paid me what I was worth, and didn't bury me under politics. I worked my own hours, set my own rates, and slept better than I had in years. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. Meanwhile, Veltria kept burning. News outlets picked up more tenant horror stories. Families unable to pay rent online, veterans missing housing vouchers because the system rejected government forms, elderly tenants unable to schedule emergency maintenance. Lawsuits began piling up. I knew exactly why it was happening. Without the redundancies I had built, and without the deep knowledge of how those redundancies connected, every patch the juniors applied caused 3 more failures. It was like watching someone try to rebuild a jet engine mid-flight using duct tape and YouTube tutorials. Graham resigned under mutual agreement. I wasn't surprised. He'd underestimated the value of institutional knowledge. He thought engineers were interchangeable cogs, that experience could be replaced with cheaper labor. He'd been proven wrong in the most public, humiliating way possible. The CEO called again. "Victor, we need you. We'll meet every demand you made, and more. But we need stability. Tenants are leaving. Our investors are restless. Please, help us rebuild." I looked out the window at Lake Ontario, where the waves were calm and steady. Elaine came and stood beside me. "You don't owe them anything," she said softly. And she was right. I didn't. So I made my choice. "I won't be returning as an employee," I told the CEO.